$500,000 sounds like a finish line, whether it actually is depends on a number most people never calculate. That number is your gap. It is what a year of your life costs, minus what Social Security sends you. Whatever is left over is the only thing your savings have to cover. Take 4 households, all with exactly $500,000 saved. Same money, same market, same day they stop working. Nancy is single and rents. Her gap is $27,000 a year, and covering that for life takes about $665,000 invested. She has $500. Nancy is $165,000 short. Walter is single and owns his home outright. Same balance as Nancy, but no rent. His gap drops to $16,000, which needs about $397,000 invested. Walter clears it with room to spare. Frank and Alma are a married couple, and they rent. 2 Social Security checks instead of 1 shrinks the gap to about $1,600 a year. They need $40,000 invested. They have 12 times that. Ray and Carol are married and own their home outright. Their gap is not small, it is negative. Social Security covers everything they need, with $9,000 a year left over. Their entire $500,000 never has to produce a monthly check. None of those 4 saved harder than the others. They ran the same balance into 4 different structures, and the structures decided the outcome. Keep the 4 names, because I am going to come back to each of them. 4 things build that structure, and I can rank them by exactly what each one is worth. Nancy and Walter differ on one of them. Nancy and Ray and Carol differ on another. I'm Tom. This channel is about real personal finance, the kind that works for normal people instead of the kind that sells you something. No motivational fluff, no fantasy returns, no get rich quick. Just what the math actually does over time. If that is what you want, hit subscribe. Start with what $500,000 produces on its own because that part is simple. The standard guideline says you can withdraw about 4% a year from a portfolio without running dry over a long retirement. On $500,000, that is $20,000 a year. $1,667 a month. That number is the same for everybody. It does not care who you are. The gap it has to fill is different for everybody. The first variable is the largest, and most people never think of it as a financial variable at all. Are you one person or 2? The average retired worker collects about $2,084 a month from Social Security. That is the most recent figure from the Social Security Administration. That is $25,000 a year. A couple where both worked collects roughly twice that. $50,000 a year. Now price that difference. To generate an extra $25,000 a year from a portfolio at 4%, you would need $625,000 invested. The second Social Security record in a household is worth more than the entire $500,000 we are talking about. That is why Nancy is short and Ray and Carol are not. Not because one saved harder. Because one of them has a second inflation-adjusted income stream that the other does not, and it dwarfs the portfolio. It is also the least fixable variable on the list, which is why it comes first. You cannot go acquire a second earnings record at 62. What you can do is stop comparing your balance to numbers built for 2-income households, because most retirement content quietly assumes a couple. If you are single, your portfolio has to do roughly twice the work. That is not a personal failure. It is the arithmetic of the program. The second variable is housing, and this one you have some control over. Renting at $1,800 a month costs $21,600 a year, and it rises every year for the rest of your life. Owning a $400,000 home outright is not free either. Property tax at the national average runs about $4,400. Insurance in 2026 averages about $2,500, and maintenance at 1% of value is another $4,000. Call it $11,000 a year. The difference between those two is about $10,700 annually. Prices that weigh. Replicating that difference with a portfolio at 4% takes $268,000. So a paid-off house is doing the work of more than half of the entire $500,000. It is also why Frank and Alma, the third household, clear their gap while paying rent. 2 Social Security records carried them far enough that the housing variable, which sank Nancy, only left them needing $40,000 of portfolio. One variable can rescue another. That is the part a single balance figure can never show you. That is why Walter clears it and Nancy does not. Same balance, same Social Security, both single. Walter's housing costs roughly half of Nancy's permanently. The third variable is what age you actually stop, and it has 2 separate parts that both matter. The first part is when you claim Social Security. For anyone whose full retirement age is 67, claiming at 62 pays 70% of your calculated benefit permanently. Waiting until 70 pays 124%. On an average benefit, that is the difference between $17,500 a year and $31,000 a year. $13,500 of annual difference? To replicate that from a portfolio takes $338,000. So the claiming decision alone moves 2/3 of what your entire $500,000 is worth? The second part of the age question changed this year. It is the reason a lot of 2025 retirement advice is now wrong. If you stop working before 65, you are not on Medicare yet. You buy insurance on the marketplace, and the rules for that changed on the 1st of January. If that is you, the enhanced premium tax credits that had been in place since 2021 expired at the end of 2025. Congress did not extend them, the 400% of poverty subsidy cliff came back. Kaiser Family Foundation puts the effect at a 114% increase in what subsidized enrollees pay. On average, that went from $888 a year to $1,904. And insurers raised gross rates about 26% on top of that. For an early retiree specifically, the numbers get harder. A 60-year-old earning $55,000 can now face premiums above $1,000 a month. A year ago, the subsidy would have absorbed most of it. Run that against the $500,000. 3 years of $1,000 a month from 62 to 65 is $36,000. That is 7% of the entire portfolio spent on premiums in the first 3 years. And those are the worst 3 years for it to happen? Because money withdrawn early in a retirement never gets the chance to recover. So retiring at 62 on $500,000 is a worse proposition in 2026 than it was in 2024. Nothing about your savings changed. The rules did. The fourth variable is the one nobody checks, and it is the easiest to quantify. Where is the $500,000 sitting? If it is all in a Roth account, meaning money you already paid tax on, then $500,000 is $500,000. Every withdrawal is yours. If it is all in a traditional pre-tax account, every dollar coming out is taxable income. At a realistic effective rate of about 12% for this income level, your $500,000 is really about $440,000. That is what is actually spendable. At a 22% rate, it is closer to $390,000. So the balance on your statement is overstated by somewhere between $60,000 and $110,000. It depends on where it lives and what your income looks like. That is not a reason to panic. It is a reason to know which number you are actually planning with. Now let me fill in 2 of those 4 households, because the sequence is what makes it concrete. Walter, the second household, is 62. He spent 30 years driving a delivery route around Tulsa. He is single, and his 3-bedroom house has been paid off for years. 1 person, not 2. That is the hard variable, and it means his portfolio has to carry more than a couple's would. Housing paid off. That saves him roughly $10,700 a year against renting, which is worth about $268,000 of portfolio. His spending is about $41,000 a year, including the carrying cost on the house. If he waits until 67, Social Security covers $25,000 of that. His gap is $16,000 a year. $16,000 at a 4% withdrawal takes about $97,000 of portfolio. Walter has $500,000. He is not short. He has roughly $100,000 more than his gap requires. That is his cushion for the roof, the car, and the year the market falls apart. Now Ray and Carol, the 4th household. He drove a regional route around Wichita. She worked in and out of the workforce raising children. They are 63 and 62, and their house is paid off. 2 people, not 1. 2 average Social Security records come to about $50,000 a year. They spend about $41,000, so their gap is negative. Social Security covers everything before the portfolio does anything at all. So Ray and Carol's $500,000 is not retirement income. It is a healthcare fund, a house fund, a travel fund, and an inheritance. It never has to produce a monthly check. There is a risk sitting inside Ray and Carol's situation that almost no plan accounts for. It is worth saying before their position looks too comfortable. When one of them dies, the household does not keep both benefits. It keeps the larger one and the smaller one stops. Say their split is $2,400 and $1,700 a month. The survivor keeps about $29,000 a year instead of $50,000. Household income falls by more than 40%, and the survivor's spending does not fall by 40%. The house costs the same to heat, and the property tax does not halve. Realistically, they spend 70 to 80% of what the couple spent. So a household with no gap at all becomes one with a gap of $2,000 to $4,000 a year. Covering that takes somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 of portfolio. Ray and Carol have that. Plenty of couples in the same quadrant do not, because they looked at the joint number and concluded they were finished. The couple who needs none of their portfolio today is one death certificate away from needing part of it. Walter and Ray and Carol have the exact same balance. One of them needs about $400,000 of it working, and the other needs none of it. The difference is not discipline, and it is not investment returns. It is a second Social Security record. The same thing shows up if you ask how long the money lasts against different gaps. Covering a $16,000 annual gap, which is Walter's situation, the money outlives any realistic retirement. It never runs out. Raise the gap to $20,000, and it still never runs out. At $30,000 a year, it lasts about 37 years. Covering $40,000, it lasts 21 years. Retire at 62 on that, and you run out at 83. Notice the shape. Between a $20,000 gap and a $40,000 gap, the money goes from permanent to expiring inside a normal lifespan. The balance never changed. The gap did. So here's the ranking. In portfolio terms, being a couple rather than a single person is worth about $625,000. That is the whole distance between Nancy and Ray and Carol, and it is more than the balance this entire video is about. Claiming it's 70 instead of 62 is worth about $338,000. Owning your home outright rather than renting is worth about $268,000. And having the money in a Roth rather than a pre-tax account is worth about $60,000. Every one of those is larger than what most people think their investment choices are worth. 3 of the 4 have nothing to do with the market at all. One lever moves more than any of the 4, and it is available to anyone still working. One more year before you stop does 3 things at once, and they stack. You save one more year, call it $20,000. You take one less year of withdrawals, which is another $20,000 not removed, and the whole balance grows for one more year, which on $500,000 is about $25,000. $65,000 of swing from 1 year. That is 13% of the entire portfolio bought with 12 months. And it does a 4th thing. The arithmetic above does not capture. It shortens the retirement the money has to fund by a year on the other end. And it moves your Social Security claim closer to the higher number. I am not telling you to work longer. Plenty of people cannot, and plenty of people should not. What I want is for you to make that decision with the number visible. Most people treat one more year as a vague idea rather than a $65,000 one. Now the limits, because everything above is more precise than reality is. The first is that I use the national average Social Security benefit, and averages hide enormous variation. Monthly payments in 2026 range from under $100 to over $5,000. Pull your own number from the Social Security website before you use any of this. Yours is the only one that matters. The second is that the 4% guideline is a planning number, not a promise. It comes from William Benjamin's research on historical market periods. Retire into a bad decade and 4% is optimistic. I ran every 10-year stretch in the last century of American returns. 4 of 91 finished negative and 9 came in under 3% a year. The third is healthcare after 65, which I have not priced here because it deserves its own treatment. Medicare is not free. The standard Part B premium in 2026 is about $203 a month per person. That is before a drug plan or a supplement. The fourth is long-term care. It is the largest single risk to a $500,000 portfolio and the one most plans ignore entirely. CareScout's most recent survey puts the national median cost of assisted living at $6,200 a month. 2 years of that is $149,000, which is 30% of everything Walter owns. That risk does not have a clean answer, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. What it has is a set of imperfect options, and they deserve a video rather than a sentence. The fifth is that everything here assumes your spending stays flat, and it will not. Research on actual retiree spending shows it tends to fall through the 70s as travel and activity wind down. Then it rises again later as healthcare takes over. The average conceals a curve, and where you are on that curve changes the answer. So, What to do with this? Pull your Social Security estimate at 62, at your full retirement age, and at 70. If you are married, pull your spouse's as well, and note which of the two is larger, because that larger one is the survivor's floor. All three numbers are on the website and it takes 10 minutes. Then write down what a year of your life actually costs. Not your budget, what actually left your accounts last year, adjusted for what changes when you stop working. Subtract the Social Security from the spending. Whatever is left is your gap, and it is the only number your portfolio has to cover. Multiply that gap by 25. That is what you need invested, and it is the only target that describes your situation rather than somebody else's. Compare it to what you have. For a great many people watching, that comparison comes back better than they expect. The calculators they have been using never subtracted the Social Security in the first place. I made a full video about that arithmetic and it is on the channel. $500,000 is not an answer. It is one input out of 5, and it is the only one most people ever measure. Nancy, Walter, Frank, and Alma, Ray, and Carol all did the saving part correctly. What separated them was decided years before any of them opened a retirement calculator. The other 4 are a second earnings record, a housing decision, a claiming age, and an account type. 3 of those are still in front of you if you are reading this before you retire. If this was worth your time, hit subscribe. I will see you in the next one.